The stars outside the palace window were calm, but inside the Saravellan throne hall, tension filled the air like a storm waiting to break. Princess Kalyra stood tall, her long silver robes flowing like liquid light. Her skin shimmered softly, with the bioluminescence of her kind, and her eyes, sharp, violet, and cold, reflected both beauty and fury. She was the heir to the Saravellan Empire, the most advanced civilization in the known galaxy, and today, she was being told she had to marry a human. A human, she said slowly, the word like poison on her tongue. You want me to bind myself to a species that still uses metal tools and eats food grown in dirt? The Emperor, her father, sat silently on his glass throne. Around him stood the High Council, all watching her with quiet judgment. The decision had been made. Kalyra couldn't believe it. The Saravellans were clean, wise, and centuries ahead in biotech. Humans were noisy, emotional, unpredictable, and worst of all, physically unhygienic. Their bodies produced oils and bacteria. They sweated. They aged so quickly. To her, they were like wild animals who had somehow managed to build spaceships, but politics didn't care about feelings. War had been close. Too close. Humanity had risen fast. Too fast. They had spread like a wildfire across star systems, not with elegance, but with raw will. Their technology wasn't graceful, but it worked. Their soldiers weren't genetically perfected, but they fought with a kind of fire no simulation could predict. The only way to stop a full-scale war was a formal union, a royal marriage, her marriage. The chosen human was a man named Elias Reeve, a commander in Earth's interstellar fleet, known for strange tactics and surviving impossible battles. Not handsome, not noble by Saravellan standards, but brave, stubborn, respected by his people. I will never touch him, Kalyra said firmly. You will not need to, replied the Emperor calmly. Ceremonial gloves are permitted, but Kalyra knew the truth. Once the marriage happened, her life would never be the same. She would have to travel with him, speak with humans, be seen next to one. It was shameful. Still, she bowed her head. I accept. Elias Reeve was cleaning his boots when the Saravellan transport ship arrived. He wasn't much for grand entrances. His uniform was wrinkled. His hair, always a bit wild, refused to stay flat even with water. But when the time came, he stood tall, shoulders back, and marched into the alien docking chamber like he owned the place. He didn't. The chamber was alive. Literally. Saravellan technology was all organic, walls that pulsed gently like breathing, skin, lights that adjusted to emotion, air that smelled faintly of flowers. Elias hated it already. He tried not to scratch his neck as dozens of alien eyes watched him. They were beautiful in a strange, artificial way, like sculptures carved from moonlight. But none of them looked friendly. They looked like they were staring at a virus. Then he saw her. Princess Kalyra walked toward him like a queen of stars. Her face was flawless, her movement like music, and her expression pure ice. This is going to be fun, Elias thought, not smiling. Their first meeting was short and silent. Kalyra said nothing, didn't bow, didn't offer her hand. Elias saluted awkwardly. She barely acknowledged it. He noticed she wore gloves, thick ones, not fashion, protection. The royal aide stepped forward, explaining that the two would travel together aboard the Everstill, a massive Saravellan cruiser heading to the ceremonial planet. There, the wedding would be held. Until then, they would be under shared diplomatic confinement. Great, Elias muttered under his breath. Locked in a flying palace with a space princess who hates my guts. Kalyra heard. She didn't respond, but her jaw tightened. Days passed on the Everstill. Kalyra avoided Elias completely. She had her own wing filled with light gardens, music spheres, and soft echoing halls. Elias stayed in his assigned suite, clean, minimal, and so advanced that he didn't know how to use half the controls. The bed adjusted to his blood pressure. The walls played soft whale music every morning. Once the bathroom tried to scan his liver when he just wanted a shower. But he didn't complain. He walked the ship, asked questions, even made friends with a few engineers who were curious about human primitive tech. Elias showed them how he could fix a broken data lens using nothing but a soldering iron and recycled copper wire. They looked horrified. When Kalira found out, she scolded him. "You can't weld ancient garbage into living systems." "It worked, didn't it?" Elias replied with a grin. "And no one died. Yet." She turned away, disgusted, but she didn't stop thinking about it. One night during a silent dinner, Elias surprised her with a question. "Do you actually think all humans are disgusting?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she studied his face. His eyes weren't like Cerebellin eyes. They didn't glow, didn't shimmer, but they had something else. Something raw. Something real. "You smell like iron and oil," she said coldly. He shrugged. "That's better than smelling like fear." She blinked. Not in anger. In surprise. He didn't look angry. He looked sad. "I didn't ask for this marriage either," he said. "But I'm trying. You might want to try too." He stood and left before she could reply. That night, Kalira sat alone in her private chamber. The stars moved slowly outside her window. The ship hummed softly. And for the first time in her life, she wondered if her people had taught her only half the truth. Maybe humans weren't clean or graceful, but maybe they were something else. Something stronger. Something good. She touched her gloved fingers to her lips, thinking about his words, and she felt, deep in her chest, the first crack in the wall she'd built her whole life. The Everstill moved smoothly through the stars like a living creature. Its walls whispered softly, alive with Cerebellin energy. The ship had everything: peace gardens, emotion chambers, memory fountains. But to Elias Reeve, it felt like a golden cage. He had never felt so alone in a place so full of people. Everywhere he went, the crew stared at him. Some kept a polite distance. Others wore masks or thin gloves, as if his presence might infect them. One engineer even sprayed the air after. Elias walked past. Still, he didn't lose his smile. He'd grown up in harder places. Earth cities where food was grown in old tires and clean water was a luxury. He was used to being the outsider. What bothered him was how cold Princess Kalira remained. She hadn't said more than a few words since their last conversation. And yet, he had noticed something. Sometimes when she thought he wasn't looking, she watched him. Her gaze was not angry. It was curious, confused, maybe even afraid. Kalira sat in her chamber, the walls glowing soft blue around her. She was reading Elias's profile on her wrist lens, his missions, his background, his childhood on Earth. Nothing about him was royal or elegant, but still she found herself returning to his face. His eyes. They were not beautiful by Cerebellin standards, but they were steady, alive, honest. She didn't understand him. Why did he smile when people mocked him? Why didn't he fight back when insulted? Why did he fix things with dirty tools and strange logic instead of using the clean bio tools the ship offered? Most of all, why didn't he hate her? She had been cold, rude, and distant. And yet, Elias kept showing up. He greeted her every morning with a simple, "Good day, princess." Sometimes he even brought her human items like a paper flower made from old ship maps or a small music device that played soft earth songs. Kalira didn't keep the gifts, but she didn't throw them away either. One morning, the royal advisor informed them of the next part of their journey, the soul view ceremony. Elias frowned. "What's that?" Kalira looked away. "It's a ritual, a shared dream. We both enter a memory field and see each other's past." "You mean, like, emotional X-rays?" "Something like that," she replied softly. Elias ran a hand through his messy hair. "Sounds dangerous." Kalira met his eyes. "Only if you have something to hide." The Soulview chamber was shaped like a blooming flower. The floor opened like petals and the couple stood at the center. White mist rose around them, full of glowing threads of memory. A Saravellan priestess spoke ancient words. The threads wrapped around Elias and Kalira's heads like silver vines. And suddenly, they were inside each other's minds. Kalira stood in a broken street under a human sky. The air smelled of smoke and sweat. Children ran barefoot, laughing in the ruins of buildings. A small boy with bruised knees gave half of his sandwich to a crying girl. That boy was Elias. She saw him grow, fighting for his people, saving friends during fires, choosing kindness over safety. Even when he was cold, hungry, and bleeding, Elias always helped someone. She saw him refuse orders that would kill civilians. She saw him cry for lost soldiers. She saw him risk his life to carry a wounded alien to safety, one of her people. Kalira felt his emotions like waves, fear, loyalty, hope. He wasn't perfect, but he was real. Elias stood in a palace of light, watching a young Kalira walk with perfect posture. She was taught how to speak, how to bow, how to hide pain. Every day she practiced how to be flawless. No hugs, no open laughter. Just duty. Always duty. He saw her sitting alone in gardens no one else visited. He saw her hands tremble under heavy gloves as her mother scolded her. He saw her bury grief behind her calm face. She had never been touched, never been comforted. Even her tears were wiped away by sterile cloths. He felt her fear, fear of being weak, fear of being wrong, fear of not being enough. And then, he understood her. The soul view ended. The mist fell. The chamber dimmed. Kalira and Elias stood. In silence neither spoke, but something had changed between them. Later that evening, as they walked back toward their chambers, Kalira stumbled, her body still weak from the emotional overload. Before she could fall, Elias caught her. His hand, warm, strong, bare, closed, gently around her wrist. Kalira froze, her whole body tensed. For a moment her training screamed at her to pull away, but she didn't. His touch was not rough, not greedy, not dirty. It was steady, comforting. She looked up at him. "I thought you would feel wrong," she whispered. Elias smiled softly. "Guess I'm full of surprises." Kalira didn't pull her hand back. She didn't speak either, but her eyes searched his face as if she were seeing him for the first time. And maybe she was. The next morning, Kalira entered the dining chamber early. Elias was already there, drinking bitter human coffee and humming some off-key earth tune. She sat beside him, closer than before. He raised an eyebrow. "Feeling brave today?" She gave a small smile. "Maybe." They ate in silence, but not an uncomfortable one. It was new, fragile, but peaceful. When Elias stood to leave, he paused, then held out his hand, offering, not asking. Kalira stared at it. Then slowly, her gloved fingers touched his palm. Not for duty, not for show, but for something else, something beginning. For the first time since the journey began, Princess Kalira didn't feel like she was walking beside a stranger. Elias Reeve, the human she had once called dirty, now felt different. Not perfect, not Saravellan, but somehow more real than anyone she had ever known. They were still different in every way, her steps light and graceful, his loud and clunky. She dressed in flowing robes with shining crystals. He wore simple clothes and boots that squeaked slightly on the polished ship floors. But when they walked together now, it wasn't awkward. It was quiet, calm, almost comfortable. Their closeness did not go unnoticed. On the Everstill, whispers moved faster than the stars. The crew, once cold and distant toward Elias, now watched him with curiosity. Some even began to speak to him without masks. One young navigator asked about Earth's fireplaces. Another tried Earth coffee, then immediately spit it out. Kalira watched this with interest. "How do you stay patient?" she asked Elias one evening. "With them?" Elias laughed. They're not so bad, just nervous. Same way I felt walking into your ship. And with me? She asked, her voice softer. Elias looked at her, serious now. You're not scary, you're just guarded. I get it. Kalira didn't reply, but a small part of her chest, something locked away for years, began to warm. Soon the ship reached orbit around Alaris Prime, the sacred planet where royal weddings were held. But before the ceremony, one final test remained: the binding touch. Kalira had heard the story since childhood. A Saravellan rite. Two partners stand inside the heart ring, a glowing circle of living vines that responds to emotion and trust. To complete the bond, the couple must remove their gloves, join hands, and let the ring feel them. If the connection is true, the vines will bloom with color. If not, they wilt. Kalira felt her hands tremble at the thought. She had never touched bare skin before, not even her mother's, but now she was expected to touch his. Inside the ceremonial garden, the heart ring waited like a silver halo on the ground. The sky above Alaris Prime was violet and calm. A soft wind moved through the open chamber and gentle music floated in the air. Elias stood on one side of the ring, Kalira on the other. She looked at his hands. Strong, human, imperfect. Are you sure? She asked. I'm not afraid, Elias replied. Are you? Kalira didn't answer. Instead, slowly, she pulled off one glove, then the other. Her hands, glowing faintly with Saravellan light, looked like moonlit glass. Elias stepped forward and offered his hand. She reached out and touched him. The vines around the heart ring began to stir. First, a soft hum. Then a warm light spread across the circle, blooming in shades of gold and blue. The plants moved like they were breathing, wrapping around the couple gently, but never binding them. Instead, they danced in harmony. The watchers gasped. It had worked. The connection was real. Kalira stared at their joined hands. She expected to feel disgusted, or at least uncomfortable. But what she felt was something she had no name for. His touch was warm, not perfect, not smooth, but steady and safe. Later, they stood alone in a quiet garden. No crowds, no music, just the stars above and the sound of distant leaves. You didn't flinch, Elias said, still amazed. Kalira looked at her hands. I thought I would. I was taught that human skin was full of chaos. Too warm, too wild. He chuckled. That's one way to put it. But it wasn't bad, she continued. It was grounding. Elias sat down on a nearby bench. Most people think strength comes from power. I think it comes from knowing you're not alone. Kalira turned toward him. And you don't feel alone anymore? He looked at her, his voice low. Not when you're around. That night, Kalira dreamed of Earth. She had never visited the planet, but in her dream, she stood in a field of yellow flowers, feeling wind in her hair and sun on her face. Beside her, Elias laughed, chasing something unseen. His laugh was loud, joyful, free. She woke up smiling. But peace never lasts forever. 2 days before the wedding, alarms rang across the Everstill. The ship jolted, systems flickered. Kalira ran to the control deck where guards and officers moved in panic. What's happening? She asked. The answer came quickly. A Saravellan warship, the Pure Flame, had arrived from deep space. Not part of the Empire. A rogue vessel. Extremists. They had one message. Break the marriage, or the human dies. Elias was already in the security room when Kalira arrived. He was calm, even with red warning lights flashing. Looks like I'm not the most popular guy in your empire. This is my fault, Kalira whispered. No, this is Fear's fault, he said. Your people are scared of change, but change is coming anyway. The extremists had boarded part of the cruiser. They were closing in. The crew was panicking. Kalira wanted to fight, but she had never trained for war. Elias looked her in the eyes. "Let me talk to them. You'll be killed, not if they see what I've seen." He walked into the negotiation chamber, unarmed, alone. The rogue Saravellan stared at him, some with hate, others with doubt. Their leader shouted, "You are not worthy of royal blood." Elias stood firm. "Maybe I'm not, but I never asked for this. I didn't come here to take anything. I came to build something new." They laughed. "You touch her skin. You share her path. You poison her future." Elias stepped closer. "She touched mine too, not with fear, with choice. Can't you see? That's not weakness. That's strength." The leader raised a weapon. Kalyra burst into the chamber, eyes blazing. "She is not poisoned," she shouted. "She is awakened." Her voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. Silence followed. The extremists froze. Slowly, they lowered their weapons, not because of threats, but because of truth. The bond was real. And no matter how different, they were this human and this princess, they were stronger together. The attack was over, but the silence that followed felt heavy. Princess Kalyra stood beside Elias in the royal chamber. The extremist group had been taken into custody. No one was hurt, but everyone knew what had almost happened. Trust had been shaken. Still, the bond between Elias and Kalyra had done something important. It had held. The crew saw it. For the first time, they didn't see a human as a threat. They saw a partner. And they didn't see Kalyra as a cold, untouchable leader. They saw a woman who made her own choices, and she had chosen Elias. Later, Elias sat alone in the quiet garden chamber looking up at the stars. He thought about Earth, about home, about how strange this journey had become. A month ago, he was just a fleet officer with simple dreams. Now he was about to marry a princess from a species that once thought humans were dangerous and dirty. He smiled to himself. "You're thinking again?" Kalyra's voice came from behind. Elias looked back. She walked slowly toward him. No gloves, no mask. Her long silver robe shimmered in the soft garden light. She looked peaceful, but her eyes were sharp, watching him. "I think too much," he admitted. Kalyra sat beside him. "I've started doing that too, since meeting you." He laughed. "Is that a compliment?" She looked at him and said simply, "Yes." The next day, the wedding rehearsals began. Alaris Prime, the royal wedding planet, was a wonder. Floating. Gardens, music that echoed from crystal towers, and creatures made of living silk danced through the air. The ceremony would be held in the Sky Hall, where both Saravellan and human guests would watch. Elias hated rehearsals. Too formal, too quiet, too perfect. But Kalyra? She moved like she was born for it, every step graceful, every word precise. "You're too stiff," she told him during one practice. "I'm trying not to trip," Elias replied. "These shoes are slippery, and this robe weighs more than a battlesuit." She laughed softly. That was new. But even as they prepared, danger still lingered. Kalyra's advisor, Lord Vesson, came to her chamber in secret. He looked pale and worried. "There's something you should see," he whispered. He showed her a message intercepted from another Saravellan vessel. It was a secret communication, one that spoke of betrayal. Someone close to the throne had contacted the pure flame before the attack. "What does this mean?" Kalyra asked. "It means the attack wasn't only from outside. Someone on this ship helped them." Kalyra felt cold. Elias was still in danger. She found Elias near the observation deck, watching the planet turn slowly below. "We have a problem," she said without hesitation. He turned. "What kind?" She handed him the message. "Someone inside the Empire wants to break the alliance. Someone powerful." Elias read the text, his face calm but focused. "Could be anyone. We have to be careful now. No more public appearances, until we find the traitor." Elias nodded. "If this marriage scares them so much, maybe we're doing something right." She looked at him, surprised by his courage. "You're not afraid?" she asked. "I'm always afraid," he said. "But I'm still here, aren't I?" That night, Kalira couldn't sleep. She walked the palace halls alone, thinking of everything. Duty, power, peace, Elias. Suddenly a shadow moved behind her. She turned fast, but not fast enough. A sharp hand grabbed her wrist. A masked figure pulled her toward the wall. She struggled, but another figure appeared, this one with a glowing blade. "You are not pure," the first one hissed. "You shame the Empire." Kalira tried to scream, but before she could, a loud voice echoed behind them. "Let her go." Elias charged from the hallway, weapon in hand. Not a gun, just a tool he had modified from a broken console. A bright flash struck the ground, sending sparks everywhere. The attackers jumped back. One fled. The other tried to fight, but Elias didn't back down. He tackled the masked figure, wrestling them to the ground. The blade sliced his shoulder, but he held firm. Guards arrived seconds later. The attacker was unmasked. It was someone from Kalira's own staff. In the medical wing, Elias sat with his arm bandaged. Kalira sat beside him, her eyes filled with emotion. "You could have been killed," she said. "I'm used to danger," he replied with a shrug. "But you saved me. I didn't come this far to lose you now." Kalira took his hand, both of them ungloved. "I thought I was marrying you for peace," she whispered. "But now, I think I want to marry you because I choose to." Elias looked at her, surprised. Then he smiled, slow and real. Finally, a real reason. The next day, security was doubled. All staff were screened. The traitor confessed that a hidden group of royal advisors feared Kalira would soften under human influence. They were right. She had softened, but not in weakness, in strength. For the first time in her life, Kalira spoke in front of the full crew. "I was taught that emotion is a flaw, that touching others makes you weak. But I was wrong. Elias Reeve showed me that courage lives in kindness. And now, I see that together, we are stronger." Across the ship, people began to change. Masks were removed. Gloves came off. Humans and Ceravellans shared meals, stories, even laughter. The old fear was still there, deep down. But something new was growing too. Hope. The wedding was now more than a political act. It was a symbol of two worlds learning to understand each other, of two people, once strangers, choosing something real. The great sky over Ilaris Prime was filled with colors. Stars blinked softly above the floating wedding platform, and golden light flowed through the air like dancing ribbons. Music from both Earth and Ceravella played together. Two styles, two cultures now in harmony. Today was the day. The wedding of Princess Kalira and Commander Elias Reeve. No longer a forced marriage. No longer a political deal. Now it was a choice. Kalira stood in front of a wide crystal mirror. Her robe was made of living silk, white with hints of blue and gold, glowing gently with her heartbeat. Her long hair was braided with star metal. No crown. No gloves. She didn't want to hide anything anymore. Beside her, her royal maid whispered, "You look like peace." Kalira smiled. "I feel it." She looked down at her hands, soft, glowing, open. Once, she feared touching another being. Now she was about to hold a human's hand in front of the galaxy, and she was proud. Elias was getting ready too, but his room was full of chaos. His suit was too tight. His boots didn't match, and his translator earpiece kept playing wedding music on repeat. "I was built for battle," he muttered, "not fashion shows." A young human officer helped him fix his collar. "You sure you're ready for this, Commander?" Elias looked at his reflection. His dark hair was neatly combed, his uniform was spotless, and his face looked serious, but calm. "I've never been more ready," he said. He didn't look like a soldier now. He looked like a partner as the ceremony began. Guests from both planets filled the sky hall. Cerevellan nobles floated in silver chairs. Human admirals stood in perfect rows. Diplomats, engineers, and curious travelers filled the seats. Even the media drones hovered quietly, recording every moment. Two paths led to the center of the hall, where a ring of living light waited. Elias stood on one side, Kalira on the other, and then they began to walk, each step slow, steady, full of meaning. The music changed. Two songs, one from Earth and one from Ceravella, blended into something new. The couple met at the center. The crowd held its breath. A Ceravellan priestess floated down in a soft beam of light. She raised her hand. Today we witness not the joining of bloodlines, but of hearts. Two beings born from different stars now choose to walk one path. Elias and Kalira faced each other. Do you, Princess Kalira of Ceravella, take this human's hand and heart, not by law, but by your own will? Kalira looked at Elias, his eyes full of trust, warmth, and that quiet strength she had come to love. I do, she said clearly. And do you, Commander Elias Reeve of Earth, take this princess's trust and bond, not by duty, but by choice? Elias smiled. Absolutely. The priestess nodded. Then let the light witness this bond. They reached out and took each other's hands, bare skin to skin. A wave of warm light shot into the sky. The hall erupted in color. The vines around them bloomed with glowing flowers. Ceravellans gasped. Humans cheered. It was done. The galaxy's first human-alien union, real, powerful, and filled with hope, had just begun. After the ceremony, the celebration began. Kalira and Elias stood on a balcony, watching fireworks rise into the stars. Behind them, music played. People laughed. Ceravellans and humans danced together, awkward at first, then joyful. I didn't think your people would dance, Elias said. Watching a Ceravellan noble try to follow a human beat, Kalira laughed. They didn't. Until today. She turned to him. You changed something. No, he said. We did. In the following weeks, their story spread across the stars. On Earth, people watched the wedding on every screen. Children dressed as space princesses and peace commanders. On Ceravella, old traditions began to shift. Gloves were removed in greeting. Touch became less feared. New trade routes opened. Science teams from both planets started working together. Mixed crews formed the first Unity fleet, a ship crewed by humans and Ceravellans alike. It wasn't perfect. Some people still feared change. But the seed had been planted, and it was growing. Kalira and Elias were given their own starship, the Emberlight, a diplomatic vessel built with Ceravellan design and human systems. Fast, strong, and most importantly, shared. They traveled from planet to planet, helping solve problems, settle arguments, and bring people together. Everywhere they went, people saw them and believed, if they could love each other, if a human and a Ceravellan princess could choose peace, then maybe anything was possible. One evening, after a long journey, they sat together on the ship's viewing deck. The stars looked close, like diamonds floating in velvet. Kalira rested her head on Elias's shoulder. Do you miss Earth? She asked. Sometimes, he said. The rain, the smell of soil, coffee. Kalira smiled. I still think coffee is awful. And I still think your mind-reading rituals are creepy. They both laughed. Then Kalira looked up at him. Do you ever regret saying yes to this? He turned to her and touched her cheek gently. Never. She closed her eyes, holding his hand. No gloves, no fear, no walls, just two hearts, from two worlds, choosing each other.